Sounds good. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the January Masterclass. So today I'm going to be giving you all an overview of inventory. So we'll do a demo, and then towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So feel free to drop questions in the chat as we're going. And then at the end, during the Q&A, feel free to unmute your audio and ask any questions you have directly. And by the way, my name is Isabel. I'm a deployment leader here at Steelhead. So let's get into it. So starting off in Steelhead, we'll want to navigate to the inventory tile. So first, to just give everyone an overview of what we have in inventory, we have inventory types, and then we also have inventory items, and inventory types are pretty intuitive, I would say. It's things that you would normally group together. We could have a type for paint, for powder, maybe lab chemicals, or packaging materials. It's really just however you would group items together. So I am going to go ahead and create a new inventory type for powder. We'll use that as our example. So once I click into my inventory type, we can go ahead and create our first item. So for my item, I'm going to go ahead and do red powder. I can put a description in here. So maybe it's a dark red powder. I can also add units to this inventory item. So I'm going to go with pounds. I can also set a target stock level. This will be used for purchase orders. So let's just say my target stock level for this item is going to be 500 pounds. I can also set an alert threshold. This will alert me when I'm at or below this threshold. So we'll say maybe 200 pounds is when I want to be alerted to order more. We can set a product on the inventory item that's used for billing purposes, similar with taxes. The next thing we have is a location. So we can set a location on our inventory in order to organize it. So if you had, for example, a location in Steelhead such as a powder storage, that's what I'm going to use as my example. You might have it organized by cabinets within your storage or shelves or something like that. So maybe this red powder I always organize in cabinet 1 of my powder storage room. I can go ahead and make that the default location for any new batches that I am adding into Steelhead. I can also tie my inventory item to a treatment. I can add vendors. I'll save that for now. And then we can set an inventory net quantity to start with. I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank so that we can see what that low inventory alert looks like. So we'll go ahead and give that a save. And we'll now see I have my new inventory item for red powder. My alert threshold is at 200 pounds. And I currently have a remaining quantity of 0 pounds because I didn't put anything in. So that's what this low inventory alert is looking like. And even from the home screen, we'll see it's giving me a notification, a little red notification there to tell me that I am low on inventory. So naturally, the next thing we would want to do is issue a purchase order for my inventory. And a super easy way to do that is going to be to go to low inventory control. I can see anything where I have an inventory item that I'm at or below the alert threshold. So I'm going to check my red powder, and let's go ahead and issue a new purchase order. And I'm going to be ordering this from Magic City Powder. So it's going to default to just populating my PO as being red powder. We can also store a vendor SKU on the inventory items. That's helpful if you're ordering different, you're ordering the same item from different vendors. Just going to leave that the way it is for now. And then what we'll also notice is that stock target is coming through here. So because my on-hand amount is 0 pounds and my stock target is set to 500, it's going to automatically populate my PO line by ordering 500 pounds. But you could change this if necessary. So I'll go ahead and say it's $1 a pound. And then let's go ahead and give that a save. Looks like I gotta actually issue the purchase order. So I'm just gonna set this to being an active purchase order. So now I have issued my PO. The next thing we're going to want to do is receive this inventory once it comes through the door. So to do that, I'm going to go to my receiving dashboard. I'm going to find my purchase order. So let's type in that vendor. It's going to be PO number 194. Here's that red powder that I ordered. So we'll go ahead and receive it. And I'm going to receive all 500 pounds that I ordered. And I'm going to mark it as receiving it today, roughly 1 o'clock. We can also add any receiver notes. So if we want to note anything when we receive in this inventory, we can. We can also upload receiver files. So that's super helpful when you have the iPads, if you want to snap a quick picture of the inventory that you received. And now we are going to go ahead and create an inventory batch. So if my powder comes with a lot number, I can go ahead and put in that lot number. I can also add the expiration date. So maybe my powder expires March 22nd. That inventory unit price is going to populate because I filled it in on the purchase order. Then this next area is where I can create containers. So the default is going to be on our inventory batch. It'll automatically have one container, but maybe I received that 500 pounds of powder in 2 separate boxes. I could then use my containers. So I could set a base name. So maybe I just want to do box as the base name. And then I'm going to add 2 containers and I'm going to split this quantity so that I have 250 pounds in each box. And then what this will allow me to do is then when I am done receiving my inventory, I can then generate QR codes for each of those different boxes that can be printed out and stuck onto each box. And then what we'll also notice here is that that default location that I set on the inventory item is coming through. But if I did want to change it, maybe I wasn't storing it in cabinet 1 this time, you can still change that. So we'll go ahead and give that a save. And it's going to pop up with my inventory QR codes. So now I'm done. So if we go back to inventory, we'll see that that notification I was getting has gone from a 4 to a 3 because I no longer have low inventory. So we can navigate back to my inventory item and we'll see I now have 500 pounds remaining for a total value of $500. And if I scroll down, I have now created an inventory batch and I can click into this batch, see more details. I can see the 2 containers that I created as well. And if I needed to print that QR code again, we can see it up in that top right. So now that I have my inventory item, the next thing we will want to do is tie it to a treatment. What this will allow us to do is deplete inventory from the workboards. So we can do this either on the inventory item or you can go into the treatment that you want to tie it to. I'm just going to do it from the item. So within my red powder, if I scroll down to the bottom, we have 2 options. If I have an existing treatment, I can link it to an existing treatment. I'm just going to create a new one. So I'm going to name my powder red powder. I'm going to assign it to a treatment group that I made for this masterclass. And then something that's cool is that you can tie multiple inventory items to the same treatment. So in the case of powder, it would likely be 1-to-1. But if we were working with something like paint, for example, where we have a catalyst involved, we could have a treatment for red paint, and then we could tie it to both the red paint inventory item as well as the catalyst that we need for the paint. And then you can set up how many parts to whole you would need. So that's super helpful for operators to see on the floor In our case, we'll just keep it as a one-to-one relationship. Then I will go ahead and give that a save. So now I have my treatment tied to an inventory item. And that's going to be super important because that connection is needed to see it in the workboards. So now what I will do is I'm going to create an order quickly. So we'll go ahead and use ABC Concrete. And I'm going to save and add parts. And let's just create a new one. We'll use fake part number 123 as our example. Give that a save. And then we're going to be powder coating it. Now here's where I can select my treatment. So I'm going to want to go ahead and select my red powder. And then we'll give it a save. Now I can navigate to my workboards. And I'm going to find my powder coating one. So now, if I go into my workboards, I am able to deplete my inventory from within the work parts screen. So we have two options here. First is that we can deplete it. Second option is we can just mark it as we used the item without necessarily having to say, I depleted this amount. I'm going to go ahead and deplete it in this case. So a couple different options here when depleting the inventory item. The first thing we'll have to decide is if we want to auto deplete. This would be FIFO or first in, first out. So whatever that oldest batch is in Steelhead, that's what we would be depleting from. The other option we could pick is to select the batch from which we want to deplete. Since we only have one batch, doesn't really make a difference, but we can do select batches if we were taking, a certain amount from our first box and then a certain amount from our second box, and we can set that as a default. And then the next thing we have to decide is how we want to deplete this. So do we want to deplete it in terms of amount remaining or amount used? So I'm going to go ahead and do it in terms of amount remaining. So I'm basically saying I have 250 pounds in box one to start with. Now maybe I have 200 in box one, and then maybe I took 60 pounds from box two, so I have remaining 190. So that is how we can choose. So we can either do it in terms of amount remaining, or we could select it and put in how much powder we used. Either one works, depending on how you deplete inventory. And then the next option we have, so in our case, we're depleting to the work order. That is going to give you the most accurate job costing information, because then you can see how much your inventory costed you on the work order. But there are some scenarios where maybe we would only deplete to a station. This is helpful if you're putting certain chemicals into a tank or something where you don't necessarily need to track it at the work order level, but more so at the station level. So I am depleting to my work order. I could add any sort of comments if I wanted to. Then it's going to tell me at the bottom, we're depleting a total of 110 pounds on one work order. I'm going to go ahead and give it a save. And now it's telling me you have used that powder. And something that's nice for visibility is I can click into this work order. And if I scroll down to the bottom, it'll give me that history. So I can see what was used on this work order and on the inventory item as well. I find my inventory item, I can click into it, and then I can look at my batch that is created. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can also see all batch transactions that are associated with the inventory. So if you're ever wondering what has happened to an inventory item over time and you want to look into the batch and see how it's been used, we can see that there. So it'll give you a history of the transactions, what happened to it, how much was used, what work order it was associated with, and also who did it. A couple other things to note while looking in the inventory batch is that other feature I was talking about if you want to simply touch the batch. So maybe you want to note that you interacted with it, but you don't necessarily want to deplete it. We can do the touch feature. We can also deplete the batch from this screen. So if we're not depleting on the floor, but maybe we want to go into the batch afterwards, we still have the option to do that here. And it's the exact same screen in terms of quantity remaining, quantity used. We can do all of that. The next thing we can do is move the batch. So if we want to change the location of a container, I could move it from cabinet 1 to cabinet 2 per se, and then I'll enter in the quantity that I want to move as well. I can also audit the batch quantity remaining. So this is helpful if, for example, maybe we forgot to deplete the inventory in Steelhead for a couple weeks and the amount is super off. Ideally, we're always depleting, we're keeping track of it, but if we do need to audit that amount to correct it, then we can go ahead and select our box. I can audit it down to 100 maybe, and I can put a comment, forgot to deplete, and give that a save, and that will adjust our total remaining amount for this batch. And if I scroll back down, we'll see it's now recording that audit transaction. So super helpful for visibility and knowing what has happened to our inventory batches. So that is another example. And then the last thing we can do at the batch level is we can assign a batch owner. So if we were holding on to powder that was provided by a customer, maybe it wasn't something you purchased, but something your customer supplied, then we could assign it to an owner and we could say that it's owned by Honda. Honda gave us this powder. So that is helpful for tracking inventory as well. So that's another way we can deplete that inventory. We can use the iPads and scan the batch QR code that was printed out, and then it will take us right to this inventory batch screen to deplete the inventory or edit any other details that we need to. And if you ever make a mistake or anything like that, or we deplete something incorrectly, we also do have the option to delete the transaction. So that is helpful to know as well. And then another way that we can deplete inventory is through this inventory management. So we have a hyperlink in the corner, or if we navigate back to our main screen, still have that hyperlink here. So we can click into our inventory management. This is nice because you can search by inventory type or that specific item. You can also filter by transactions. So if you're looking for certain items that have been used in the past week or so, you could filter it by transactions. And from here, we can see all the different items. And then very easily, we can click this arrow icon. And then we can also deplete inventory from this screen. So super easy. If you have to deplete a bunch of inventory at once, we can come to the inventory management screen and deplete from here as well. So 3 different ways to deplete inventory. You can do it on the workboards. You can navigate directly to the batch and deplete that way. And then you can also do it from the inventory management screen. And then the last thing I will cover is want to talk about predictive inventory a bit. So predictive inventory is super helpful for potential orders that you might receive in the future. How it works is we can set it up either on the inventory item or on a part number. So I will go ahead and just do it from the inventory item since that's where we've been spending most of our time. So I'm going to use my red powder as an example. And if I scroll to the bottom of that inventory item, I can set up a predicted usage for a part number. So for example, I can pick, let's go with our fake part number 123. I can pick this part number and I can set up a relationship. So I could say, for example, I think that one part will take 2 pounds of powder. We also have some power tool function there, but we're just going to keep it simple in the manual mode for now. And I'm going to go ahead and save that usage. I can also navigate to the part number, and I could edit that part number and set it up on the part number. Either one is correct. And then if I were to quote a job for this part number, I could navigate and I could go ahead and create my quote. I could select my customer, give that a save. And then when I add my part to the quote, I'll select my process and it'll pull in that red powder as a default. And then let's say I'm anticipating, 100 parts. I'll go ahead and give that a save, and we'll see it's going to trigger a low inventory alert. So if I hit show alerted items, it's going to tell me I currently have 290, 0 pounds on order, and my current predicted usage is going to be 200 pounds for this quote. So this is super helpful if, maybe you're not guaranteed to get this order in, but if you do get this order, then we would potentially need to order more. We would be below our threshold. So predictive inventory is great to set up that relationship between the inventory and the part number. So that way you don't run out of that item if you do win that job. And then one last thing I'll show. I was talking about locations. So if you're ever curious what inventory you have stored where, you can also find that in the locations module of Steelhead. So I was using my powder storage. So I can click on my overall powder storage location. And then within that location, I created sub-locations. I stored my powder in cabinet 1. So I can navigate to that cabinet 1 and I can see all the inventory items that I have in this location in Steelhead. And we can also generate a QR code for this location and you could print it out. So you could also very easily scan that with the iPad. It'll take you right to this location in Steelhead and you can see everything you have in cabinet 1 without even having to go out on the shop floor. So super helpful to have that visibility there. And I think that concludes everything that I wanted to cover for inventory. So we can now move on to the Q&A session. If anyone has any questions, I will stick around. Feel free to unmute yourself or leave a